call our meeting to order. Mr. Treasurer, would you mind calling the roll?
Ms. Adair?
Present.
President Baker?
Present.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Vice President Cole? Ms. Gibbs? Mr. Ragland?
Present.
Ms. Reyes?
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you very much. If no one minds, we can skip the Pledge of Allegiance tonight since we're a small group. Let's take a moment, though. Actually, Ms. Gibbs is on her way, so she'll be here briefly. But before we begin, let's take a moment on this eve of Patriot Day, which is tomorrow, September 11th, just to remember first responders who ran into those buildings that day, everyone who perished that day, all of those that were impacted by that day, and let's never forget that day. Let's just have a moment of silence. Thank you very much. The agenda we have,
When did you first hear it called Patriots Day? I've never heard that.
that's what the federal government calls it.
Oh, well then, it must be right.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Let's read through our agenda briefly. We will vote on our consent agenda, which is 2 items. We will then recess into executive session, and then we will adjourn our meeting subsequent to that. Is there a motion that we adopt?
Second.
Is there a second? Mr. Treasurer?
Ms. Adair?
Yes.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Is there a motion that we accept the items presented to us on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Brown, seconded by the Vice President. Discussion on those items, 4.1 and 5.1. Mr. Brown.
Do we yet have any sense whether the cost on the fire remediation is all in, or that they're still open?
Deputy Superintendent, who best to answer the question for Mr. Brown related to the cost of fire damage remediation?
Mr. Jeff Rowe, who is our energy manager, has been on
Mr.
top
Rowe.
of the project.
President Baker, President Cole, Manager Board, Treasurer Hort. There are a lot of costs that are not yet wrapped up for the fire. We expect it to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 300,000, that range total costs. We have taken steps to mitigate the impact to the board in the long term by preserving evidence and sending notices to an electrical contractor and equipment manufacturer that we think that they might be liable for this fire. As a result, we lost room 1 at Valley Forge for at least the next probably 6 to 9 weeks. In the next 3 weeks, we're setting up a time for the other companies to send an investigator of their own to the building and have a joint inspection before we decide to destroy the evidence and clean the room. So that seems to be the best way to move forward. But we do have air conditioning working in the rest of that wing that had burned, and students are back in the building. But it should be 300,000 or so.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Any other questions? Mr. Ragland?
Certainly. Was the fire around a lighting fixture?
So we've had several fires this summer. This fire at Valley Forge was a little more, way more extreme than the other very minor fires. In 4 events, we had fires that resulted from the electrical contractor and or the lights that were installing these fixtures, which are name brand lights. The failure mode in the 4 earlier cases were all, instead of rewiring the light fixture per the manufacturer instructions, they just stuck the new LED lamp into the fixture without bypassing the ballast, the electrical component that operates the lamps. And instead of turning off right away, these lamps will work for a number of hours and then will ignite, and that will actually catch the light fixture on fire. And then the plastic lens and light fixture might drip onto the floor, bringing fire with it and spreading that method.
Mr. Ragland?
So in total, how many times has this happened? I know the fire was more widespread on this occasion, but there are other occasions where this has happened with the same contractor. Is that what you're saying?
There were 3 different contractors that all had a fire of this sort, and 2 different make and models of lamps involved this summer. So four total incidents plus this incident out of roughly 40,000 lights that were wired so far this summer. So it is a small percentage, but the price is huge for failure.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Any other questions on item 4.1, Mr. Vice President?
I just want clarification again. So we're talking about 4 different incidents. We're talking about 3 to 4 different contractors or the same contractors?
3 different contractors, 1 fire for 2 of them, and now that we had 3 fires with the 3rd contractor.
But with the same, not the same exact product or name brand, but type of product has been the issue. So we're talking about LED lighting in all of these incidents, all 4 of these incidents.
That is correct.
Interesting.
It's essentially a bulb that looks just, actually it is these bulbs, that what happens is you bypass the ballast that was in the fixture and then you run hot and neutral either side of the lamp. There are a couple advantages to doing this type of retrofit. The biggest advantage is when these lamps do eventually start getting old and burning out or going dim, our building custodians can change the lamps as opposed to using an electrician to change the whole fixture. It also is a lot cheaper to implement because you don't have to repaint around the light fixture or go through the effort of replacing a light fixture.
So who inspects the work? And what will we do moving forward to ensure this type of incident doesn't happen again, especially as we retrofit buildings with newer material?
So this is electrical work, and there is a certified electrician on each of these contractors that are directly responsible for the work. We've also contracted with a project management company who makes sure that they're following all the processes that make sense to do. So they're being supervised by an extension of me, this project management company. And additionally, this work is being moved very quickly because we are receiving a grant from the state of Ohio for up to half the project cost. But the work would have to be done by the middle of September in order to be eligible for that grant. So we definitely are moving quickly in this project.
Okay, I hear, I don't know that I totally appreciate, but I do hear that you're trying to move expeditiously on something. I think my concern, though, is that our children are involved, praise God Almighty, and yes, I said it in a board meeting, that no child was in the building or no staff was in the building and got hurt as a result. But what are we learning from this lesson, and then how are we going to execute moving forward so that there are no incidents like this?
So there are a couple of steps that we are doing now that are better. The original plan was to basically cut the wires on the ballast in the fixture and leave the ballast in place. And now we're having the contractors prove that they're removing the ballast, or bypassing by actually removing them and counting the ballast that need to match the number of lamps that are being removed, or half as many depending on how the ballasts are wired up. We're also forcing these contractors to use a buddy system where it's not just one person involved in this lighting retrofit, but 2 different people are looking at it. But the real improvement in the future is going to be the lamps that we specify will have to come with a safety circuit to prevent this from happening. I'm fairly certain that these were supposed to have that in the first place, and they don't appear to be working.
Mr. Ragland?
So the project management company, how was that company determined?
So Ascension Services is the name of the company that we are using. We began using them actually just this year to help buildings and grounds be more effective with our time.
Mr. Rowe, excuse me, the question was how were they selected? Is that right, Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Okay.
In this instance, they were selected by low bid on publicpurchase.com. They responded to the bidding system.
Is that typical because of the speed with which we needed them, or what was I mean?
So we used publicpurchase.com to select this vendor because we weren't sure what the pricing would come in at, and that we believe is the best way to find contractors in general above a certain dollar threshold so that we can ensure that we're doing a reasonably good job with the taxpayer money.
So, I guess my
Yes,
question,
sir.
President Baker,
Yes.
excuse me, is that's our process though, right? That's, okay. My next question is around this new fixture that will be put in place to kind of resolve the issue that Vice President Cole talked about. Is this a specific product from a specific brand, or is this something where there are several different products of the same nature that we will, we'll figure out what's the best, most responsive bid for?
There are many makes and models of similar.
Okay, so we're not tied into a specific product.
This is not a proprietary thing, they're interchangeable parts completely.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Other questions? Board Member Gibbs, and would the treasurer please note the arrival of Board Member Gibbs? Thank you, sir.
Just very quickly, could you repeat the name of that website?
Publicpurchase.com.
Did you say lowbid.com or something?
Publicpurchase.com.
That's
Yes,
Low
ma'am.
purchase.
Public purchase, the low bid on the project through public purchase.
Okay, I was concerned it was something called.
No,
Thank you.
no.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments on the consent agenda items? All right. Mr. Treasurer, would you call the roll, please?
President Baker,
Yes?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Vice President Cole,
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Ms. Reyes,
Yes.
and Ms. Adair.
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Let's move on then, and I'll ask the Vice President to offer a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is recommended that the board recess into executive session per section 121.22G1 of the Ohio Revised Code to consider the appointment, employment, or compensation of public employees.
Second.
That is a motion, and that is a second by Board Member Reyes. Mr. Treasurer?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Vice President Cole,
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Ms. Reyes,
Yes.
Ms. Adair,
Yes.
President Baker,
Yes?
motion carried.
Thank you. The board will now recess into executive session. We will meet in this room. So if you are not required for that executive session, I would ask you to have a good evening.